Why did the early British visitors and administrators to the Horn of Africa come to the conclusion that the Somali were living, or the lifestyle of the Somali and the structure of their social life was so similar to what is described in the Old Testament of the Bible? Now, this is something I've seen in several books, and I'm going to read sections of two books where that is mentioned. And I don't know why that is so, but we are going to read to see what that's all about. Now, the first book that we are looking at is a book that was, and this is a book that I've done a lot of videos from, and it's a book that was published in 1894, and it was written by one Major HGC Swayne. The title of the book is 17 Trips Through Somaliland. Now, this HGC Swayne guy was an administrator. In fact, he was, if not the first, could be among the very first administrators who was sent by the British to the British Somaliland then. And he helped build the very first, we could say, governance structures of that protectorate. Now, there is a section of his book where he talks about that, or he brings that up. In fact, it is the preface of the book. And this is what he writes in the preface of the book. And this is a short one. The next one is a longer read. He says, Somaliland, the new British protectorate, is in some respects one of the most interesting regions of the African continent. In the present daily life of its native, we have represented to us something of the wandering patriarchal existence of biblical times. The country contains ruins which probably date back to a period of very ancient civilization. So that's what he writes in the preface of the book titled 17 Trips Through Somaliland. Now, the first time I read that, I did not really think about it a lot. In fact, I did not even do a video about that section. But then at the moment, I'm reading another book, and this is a book that is written by one Henry Rayne. He was also an early administrator in British Somaliland, and he wrote a book titled Sand and the Somals. This was published in 1921. Now, in this book, he writes something quite very similar, and I think is a little bit more elaborate than HGC Swayne. And we are going to read, he's also writing this in the preface of the book. Let's read and see what he says. This is what he writes. And I apologize for the noise from in the background. It's my neighbor doing construction. Looks like it's going to take a little bit more time, so I just need to do videos even while he's doing that. This is what he writes. The Somali has deeply religious tendencies and is the stoutest of Muslims. In addition to the Mohammedan code, which he obeys implicitly, he has a complicated tribal code of his own. Of course, he means that the Somalis obey the religious laws of Islam very sort of strictly, we could say strictly. But beside that, they have their own laws, the hair laws as they are called, which also guide how they live their lives. Then he continued to say, he knows much and practices what he knows of the old Jewish and biblical hygienic laws. So, looks like this individual had observed that the hygienic laws that the Somalis were following were very similar to the biblical hygienic laws of the ancient Jewish or society. That's what he basically says. Now, I don't know what specific hygienic laws he's talking about here, but he writes that down. Then he continues to say, he recognizes the right of a man to slay, providing he pays 100 camels for a man, 50 for a woman. That is the blood money. The Somali respects a woman and references chastity. So he says the Somali generally respects a woman, but they also expect or bestows or requires chastity. He continues to write, the Somali wanders afar. You will find him walking as far. You'll find him working as deckhand, fireman, or steward on all the great liners trading to the east. This is something I've talked about in other videos, and is something that is captured by several other writers that actually Sir Richard Burton writes about it. HGC Swayne writes about it, and this guy is also writing about that similar thing or similar issue that during the 19th century, it was so common to find Somalis in very many places around the world, Australia, the UK, the US, they were all over the place. They used to work. But there was something unique about them, and that is while they were out there, they would just mingle with the other people and do work, but they still retain their traditions and way of life. And in the end, they usually came back, and the way what caught the attention of these early British we could say settlers, is that these people, when they came back, they did not come with the things they had learned outside there, like the way of life. They did not change. They just came back and fitted so well with the society that they had come from. He continues, I know of a Somali tobacconist in Cardiff, that's in the UK, a Somali mechanic in New York, and a Somali trader in Bombay. The latter of whom speaks French, English, and Italian fluently. The Somali considers that British magistrates are appointed to his country solely to relieve the monotony of his life, and he pesters theirs with all kinds of cases, both petty and intricate. That's very interesting that he thought the Somali did not think that the British were appointed to really solve anything important. It was for their benefit. And I think it makes sense. The British came to Africa for their benefit, not the benefit of the Africans. The Somali in his own country is conservative. He has little time for men not of his own race, excepting perhaps the Arab mullahs, a few of whom wander amongst his people, teaching the great Mohammedan truths. So that's important. Again, that first sentence basically goes back to what I said, that these early British administrators identify and explorers and travelers actually noted that most Somalis, when they came back to their country, remained to be conservative. They did not really bring new style of living, new belief systems. They just remained conservative once they came back to their country. And he also says that they have little time for men not of their own race. Like they do not really spend or invest a lot of time in other people who are not their own. So basically, the Somali preferred spending time and building relationships with amongst themselves, really not caring so much about other people. Except, of course, he says Arab mullahs, one or few of them will come and stay among the Somalis, maybe teaching religious education and things like that. He continues, he is never internally at rest. His tribe is divided into sections and subsections and clans, and the clans are forever disagreeing amongst themselves. The subsections then interfere, and it may so happen that quarrels extend to the sections. If these are not settled, the result may be much bloodshed. So the Somalis would sometimes disagree amongst themselves, and sometimes that will end up being physical fights. But it is always here that the British administration steps in, and to it nowadays the Somali turns to settle his domestic affairs when they get beyond his control. So it's basically saying that the British were bringing peace to the Somalis. I don't know whether that is true or not true. That's the point he makes. Yeah, so you can check the links that are in the description box or the pinned comment, and you can find or you can go and read this book or books for yourself. And you can also get physical copies actually, and you can check my book reading list. That's where the link is still provided, and you can go find some of these books and you can have physical copies if that's your thing. That is that's my random thoughts.